This week marks the 113th anniversary of the African National Congress, and throughout the week the party hosted a series of events in the Western Cape to mark the occasion that will culminate in the delivery of the January 8th statement by party president Cyril Ramaphosa tomorrow. For a look at this and all other political news that made headlines this week, I'm joined by political analysts Professor Booysen and Sanusha Naidu. Good afternoon to both of you. Thank you so much for your time. I'm going to start with you, Prof. Surprise. After months of speculation, Booysen Ndlozi resigns as EFF MP.
Yes, that indeed did not come as a surprise. He, on consideration of the impact of his leaving the post of MP, well, we are certainly not yet sure, no confirmation yet as to whether he had actually left the party, but the type of farewell of wishing him well in future endeavors, that sounds like a departure from the party as well. But irrespective, I think all possible losses that the EFF has suffered there have already been discounted in the preceding months. He was not very active in the EFF's election campaign, and since the election he hasn't been part of major events, not of the conference either. So it is really as if the party has been very well prepared for this possible loss, and we are very interested to see the way forward.
Well, Sanusha, in a statement, the party calls it, quote unquote, a voluntary request to be released from deployment, close quotes. Of course, party leader Julius Malema will no doubt put on a brave face, as he has done in the past, when he eventually gets to speak publicly about this.
Yeah, good afternoon, Vio. Good afternoon, Susan, and to the viewers. I mean, yeah, I think it's kind of like almost, this was coming. We were waiting for this to happen, and of course, saying that it was a voluntary request kind of says, well, we acceded to what the individual wanted, and this is what the person had requested, and we basically just obliged in terms of that request. So it kind of puts both sides in this kind of not in a political battle, but rather a kind of non-battle process, that he felt that it was a better time to move on. The party doesn't want to stand in his way. I mean, there's different ways you could interpret it, but I think it kind of gives a kind of light tone to the idea that what's going on in the party right now is almost that the party is going through its own evolutionary process as well.
Coming as this move does, Prof, on the back of, or so close, after Malema's deputy, Floyd Shibambu, defected to the MK party, should Julius Malema be worried?
I think there's a lot of reason for concern on the future directions of the EFF, because these are several persons key persons in the EFF around Julius Malema who have now exited. High-profile people who are now largely lending their power to the MK party after EFF had already come short against the MK party in the mid-year last year elections. So we have not seen a matching influx of new blood, new prominent, fascinating, dynamic people to step into those voids. And of course, it is a problem that one can expect a small political party like this, relatively small, but with a young, roughly equal age set of political leaders, and central leader Julius Malema, with no intention of resigning, is probably going to be there for a long time. So one would expect other leaders to look for other options if there is no possibility to rise into new future positions in the party. So it's a predicament that a party like this suffers, but it is a serious point of concern for the EFF because we just do not see the matching growth and dynamic. We do not see younger people, new youth figures coming in again. We've heard the EFF recognize that they probably will have to recruit more broadly among young people, we would want to see specific evidence of such initiatives in order to grant the EFF chances for future growth.
Well, Sanusha, I mean, he did exercise his option, Floyd Shibambu, that is, but it appears that Floyd is not safe in his new home either. There appears to be a tug of war between a faction that he leads and another faction that's being led by the former president's daughter.
Yeah, I think these speculations that we're hearing of this tug of war, as you mentioned, Vio, as well as the tensions around what's happening in the MK party, again, suggests that leaving one party for another is not an easy task, that you've got to find and navigate the spaces that you find within that party, especially a party like the MK, particularly in the way that it kind of constitutes itself, the kinds of personalities that exist within the party, and the architecture and the ecosystem of this party that's built around a particular personality, and the role of individuals that surround the leader of this party. So I think for me personally, it was something that, as we heard of Floyd Shivambu's resignation and leaving of the EFF, and then of course the announcement that he was going to join the MK party, and the way he was welcomed into the party and given that strategic space and the opportunity to really exercise perhaps some of the kind of inability that he had to be able to exercise in the EFF, his own kind of vision and thinking, etc. In the back of my mind, I was just waiting to see how this would play out, because again, you've got other personalities in the MK party that also have very vested interests, have very potential ambitious interests, and of course now we have to think about how much of what we're hearing has to be tested in terms of the real impact that this is going to have for what Susan said, which was quite important, I think, in terms of how this MK party also grows amongst that kind of a level of young people. And where do they find that base? Because in the election, that was an important constituency for the MK party as well. And of course, you've seen, big personalities that have defected to the MK party, who have resigned from the EFF and joined the MK party. And also joined from doing a kind of floor crossing in Parliament, so to speak. So I think it's going to be very interesting to watch that space, particularly because we're moving into the local government election. And I think it would be fascinating to watch how that architecture, that ecosystem is kind of frameworked in terms of, can they get over these kinds of tensions? And if these tensions do play a critical role, how do they actually impact on the party going forward?
Well, it would appear that the party's leader, Jacob Zuma, is indeed concerned. He even gave the party leadership a bit of a tongue lashing. But I don't know, Prof, whether could this be, teething problems for a 1 year, to be expected of a 1-year-old party, or is this the beginning of the unraveling? We'll explore that, but also Jacob Zuma's demand, saying, bring back my ANC membership. But we'll also talk, of course, about the big story of this weekend, which is the birthday celebrations of the ANC, as it goes into that all-important rally tomorrow. Well, it will give the country and the party faithful directions, a sense of where it's going to take things this particular year. That and more coming up in a moment with Sanusha Naidu and Professor Susan Booysen. Don't go away. If you've just joined us, I am with political analysts Professor Susan Booysen and Sanusha Naidu. Prof, bring back my ANC membership. That's Jacob Zuma's demand as he opened the weekend this year with a court challenge in that regard.
Yes, indeed. That was political entertainment of the week. This rather enigmatic situation around the MK and Jacob Zuma. retaining the dual membership and seemingly fighting to reinstate his ANC membership, demanding that his exit from the ANC at the ANC's initiative, of course, be reversed. And one gets a serious impression that he is really trying to spoil the ANC's party, if it could be spoiled any further after a few other mishaps in the week, but really being deliberate and revengeful and trying to focus some of the limelight on himself and his quarrels with the ANC, furthering his argument that he is actually, far-fetched as it is, of course, but that he is actually the real voice of the ANC, the real ANC, the authentic, etc., type of ANC. So one cannot take that initiative too seriously, but the thing is, it is a thorn in the flesh of the ANC, and it did distract from the ANC's overall thrust of trying to celebrate its 113th anniversary this week. And yes, so it added a kind of mixture, mixed feelings, mixed sentiments in a situation where the ANC is really battling, apart from logistical nightmares, stadium questions, visitation of deputy president to household issues, etc. It was not an ideal run-up for the ANC to a very important moment, the first time since 1994 that it delivered, will be delivering the anniversary statement without being the majority party. And in the past, we've often seen that the ANC could come with many of these phrases: we must do, we shall instruct government to give attention to X, Y, Z, we have these plans, etc., and really project on what they see as a plan of action for the year. Given that the ANC is now in a coalition government with a party that is very popular in the Western Cape, of course, makes it quite complicated. But given the coalition situation, it is not so easy anymore for the ANC to say we shall instruct government. People really frown on that, if that an announcement of specific plans which might not have been consulted with the 9 coalition partners come to the fore. So the ANC would have to trade very carefully in this. Simultaneously, we know this from various Cyril Ramaphosa statements over the last few months, they try to project that it is still actually the ANC that is in charge of this coalition government, that is the ANC's election promises and past plans as government and as party that will be taken forward. So it is a very big minefield area for the ANC to negotiate.
Sanusha, I don't know. I mean, the whole Zuma, as absurd as his demand is, I'm sure there is, as far as he's concerned, a strategy behind what he is trying to do. But venturing into the issues that Prof has just raised, beginning with what Prof calls the mess-ups, this week. You had the mayor of Cape Town calling the ANC out because an impression has been created that, one, they were sabotaged. They didn't get the venue. Of course, Fikile Mbalula spinning this and saying that they are actually taking the ANC to the people. Of course, we know that given a choice, they would have wanted to go to places like the big stadium in town. What do you make of their, organization? I mean, it doesn't seem like they actually learned lessons from the May 29 elections if the organization of this January 8th statement rally is anything to go by.
Indeed, Will. And I think the challenge for the party is that it always gets its aesthetics wrong. And I'm not sure why, because it's not as if you don't know when your birthday is, or you don't know that you need to organize for it, or you don't know that there is a whole process that needs to be followed in terms of the venue, the logistics, and just everything that goes within this organization structure, so forth. And that, I think, is the curious issue for me as well, because it's almost the absurdity that you mentioned and that Susan mentioned around the letter that of reinstatement and the court action, the same absurdity could be applied to the dysfunctionality around the organization of a birthday. And that in itself, it's not something that because you're the ANC, everything should just kind of fall into place like an enchanted forest. It's not that. It has to be done according to logistics. And if you look at the venue that they finally are using, which is in Khayelitsha, I think it's a 2,000-seater, just in terms of that. But it can go up to more because you can use the football pitch in that. Now, what that does is that raises questions around safety and security questions in terms of how many people are going to be how many people they're going to be bringing into the stadium. What are some of those issues? And that is something that the city officials will have to take into consideration. So I think they have granted them up to 22,000 people to be able to come to the stadium. But again, these things don't happen in a vacuum because it's you, the ANC. It has to happen in a systematic way of planning, organization, and of course, being able to execute your plan. And that, I think, is something that for an organization that has been doing this for a number of years, celebrating its birthday, its anniversary, it's the oldest liberation movement that it prides itself on in the continent, for it to not be able to get this very simple logistics right makes one wonder, how is it that you are functioning? And I don't think it even goes to the question of the lessons learned from May 29, 2024, or the pronouncement of the elections thereafter. I think this has been an inherent recurring challenge for the party, that they don't get that organizational structure right. And that kind of just filters and manifests right down to everywhere else. And of course, as you and Susan had said, it didn't start the week off nicely with the scuffles around the door-to-door campaign. All of that stuff doesn't bode well for a party that's supposed to actually, you can come down to less than 50%. You can be hosting this birthday celebration without having a majority, being in a government of national unity, et cetera, but you can still have functionality and organizational structure.
In fact, I don't know why it should be surprising at all, because you will recall that in the last local government elections, the same figure, Mbalula, who is now running the ANC, failed to submit lists to the IEC, resulting in the ANC being compromised in those local government elections. But of course, nothing stopped him from being elected as the CEO, effectively, of the ANC at its elective conference. But take a listen to what the mayor of the city of Cape Town had to say about this mess up, as Prof calls it.
That is just a blatant lie, and I just don't like it when the ANC continues to demonstrate a basic lack of integrity. They had no intention of ever going there. They tried at the very last minute, very, very late, to book the Cape Town Stadium. That was their first option. And they tried for weeks to get us to cancel the booking that is there for Saturday, which is the Stormers Sharks game. They tried to get us to cancel that and even accused us of trying to sabotage their January 8th celebrations by refusing them the stadium, even though they tried to book it only 2 months in advance. So I know all of that because I was involved in all of that in late 2024. And so when I saw them just blatantly lying to the public, I had to correct it. I couldn't just sit by and let them get away with that.
Tomorrow, of course, is the big day. They hope to fill up that field with, from what we've been told, 22,000 people. But what do they say to the people who will gather in that field tomorrow, Prof?
Well, that is such a delicate balance, as I broadly referred to earlier, that they will have to strike there. Apart from the fact of what is their message and what will they help facilitate coalition government to do, there are non-negotiables. They simply have to refer to people's living conditions on the grounds, people's quality of life, and of course, big issues of economic growth and unemployment, and underdevelopment and in unequal development where it takes place. Those are the big issues that have to be there and have to be addressed in concrete ways. But at the end of the day, it is the practical conditions of life, affordability of life, availability of service, willingness of the leadership to make commitments and sacrifices to serve people and help deliver on some parts of their kind of forgotten, neglected 1994 dreams. The ANC, in many ways, this is a last chance for the ANC, even if now in coalition government context, to make true to these undertakings that they've had. Because my sense is really that South African population, electorate, more broadly, and ANC followers in particular, the remaining ones, are very tired of hearing about broad plans and strategies. They want to give government, probably in this coalition government, a final chance to actually deliver more concretely, more systematically, without the huge gaps and failures in government in between that we have seen in the past. So it's a make or break situation here, not just for the ANC, but also for the broader coalition government.
On Monday, Sanusha, the president of the ANC, spoke at the event to commemorate the life and legacy of SACP stalwart and the first minister of housing in democratic South Africa, Joe Slovo. And there he was at pains, struggling, one must say, to sort of explain what actually happened on May 29 and holding responsible largely the splinter groups or the political parties that have come out of and led by former ANC leaders in the form of Jacob Zuma, who is the leader of the MK party, and of course Julius Malema, who is the leader of the EFF and the former president of the ANC Youth League. And he said very little by way of taking responsibility, in other words, the ANC leadership taking responsibility for its misfortunes. And one wonders whether he is going to continue in that vein tomorrow and say less, if anything, about taking responsibility, or the current leadership of the ANC taking responsibility for the party's less than stellar performance.
I mean, I think it's going to be par for the course. It's going to be about finding that balancing, that delicate balancing act around acknowledging acknowledging most of their mishaps and most of their indiscretions when it comes to governing and governance. And more importantly, I think around the idea that, they have not been able to do what they were supposed to have promised to do since 94, or even before 94, in the whole kind of negotiated settlement, promising to be able to fashion out an inclusive economy, fashion out the reconstruction and development program that creates growth, employment, addresses inequality. And really, I think if you're listening to the president a lot in the last couple of months, particularly in international fora, he speaks a lot about leave no one behind. The challenge is that there's a lot of people in South Africa that are excluded, that have been left behind under the context of Agenda 2030. Now, these are things of the challenges, but I think what he's going to do is that he's going to essentially use the occasion to very limitedly acknowledge those inability, the lack of governance, but then try and use the occasion to more kind of postulate around why the ANC is still relevant, why the ANC is still the only political party that can deliver on this messaging. And I think the challenge is really around how much the narrative that is spun tomorrow at the stadium, both in the celebration and the singing, the dancing, the aesthetics on the stage, the bringing out of whatever. I mean, all of that is going to be about how much do people sitting in that stadium who come there and on what basis are they brought there, which is also something very important to understand. Do they genuinely, are they genuine supporters of the party, or are they some kind of, rent a crowd, which is something we need to be careful of as well. But at the same time, those that are sitting at home, how many people are tuning in, are going to be listening to the speech, are going to be following the events tomorrow? And how much of that is going to manifest within the mindset of ordinary South Africans and say, well, we believe you. And I think that's the bottom line. Do people still believe the ANC?
Sanusha Naidu, Professor Susan Booysen, thanks to both of you for coming on this afternoon and sharing your thoughts and insights with us. Of course, Newzroom Afrika here on Channel 405 will be bringing you that speech by ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa